Chapter 1551. Forbidden Area in the Back Mountain 1. But the one who caused all this was Lin Yuyu. Besides, those whose families were killed by Lin Yuyu were also furious. They took out weapons and fiercely chopped at Lin's limbs. Ah! The sharp pain made Lin Yuyu cry out shrilly. Her body was covered with blood and she was trembling. Yun Luo Feng. It was all Yun Luo Feng's fault. If it weren't for this woman, she wouldn't have ended up like this. At the thought of this, she stared at Yun Luo Feng venomously, bit her tongue hard and spat a mouthful of blood. Yun Luo Feng, I curse you that you'll die more miserably than me, ha ha. She guffawed, and her laughter was filled with craziness and arrogance. Xuanhuan was flustered. Miss Yun, what should we do? The curse made with the blood of the tongue tip will come true. Yun Luo Feng was calm. So what? A curse is just a curse. I don't even fear the gods. Will I be afraid of her curse? Miss Yun. Xuanhuan still looked worried. In their country, they believed that curses made with the blood of the tongue tip were the most powerful and would come true. So, the queen secretly let out a sigh of relief when she heard the one Lin Yuyu cursed was Yun Luo Feng. A person could only curse once, so she was safe. Yun Luo Feng glanced at Xuanhuan. Which one is stronger, the power of a curse or the rules of heaven and earth? Xuanhuan paused and stared at Yun Luo Feng in astonishment. It must be the rules of heaven and earth. Hearing his words, Yun Luo Feng laughed. Even the rules of heaven and earth can't bind me, so what can a curse do to me? She gave a sneer, and her face looked so domineering. If the heaven wants me to die, I'll smash the heaven first. If a person wants me to die, I'll kill all his family first. If a god wants to slaughter me, I will slaughter all the gods and Buddha first. Then, let's see who can kill me. Yun Luo Feng wasn't even afraid of the gods. Would she be afraid of a little curse? If anyone wanted to kill her, she would make him disappear first. Xuanhuan was astounded at Yun Luo Feng's shocking words. He gasped and couldn't utter a single word, but First Elder who was standing on the side was very dissatisfied with her words and frowned. Miss Yun, I appreciate you exposing the true colors of state preceptor, but you can't insult the gods. The rules of heaven and earth cannot be broken by ordinary people. We should respect the gods. Quote. Yun Luo Feng cast a cold glance at First Elder and stopped his chatter. It is your business to fear gods, but I don't have anything to fear. Since you worship the gods so devoutly, why didn't they come to save you? In this country, gods were their beliefs. They respected gods, though they were only an illusory existence. However, after hearing Yun Luo Feng's words, the crowd fell silent. I think the girl is right. We worshipped gods for so many years, but we are still stuck in this place. Besides, if we don't believe in gods, we wouldn't have taken state preceptor as a god-sent savior and wouldn't have been deceived by her. I think we should find our own way to get out of here, and not just rely on ethereal deities. Quote. Hearing the public's voice, First Elder turned purple but he couldn't say anything to refute them. Chapter 1552. Forbidden Area in the Back Mountain 2. Not giving him a chance to speak, Yun Luo Feng turned her eyes to Xuanhuan. Take me to the forbidden area in the back mountain. Xuanhuan paused and subconsciously looked up at First Elder. In his questioning eyes, First Elder sighed and waved helplessly. Go ahead. First Elder. The queen turned pale. The forbidden area is too dangerous. Anyone who goes there will die. How can you allow her to enter there? Of course, the queen said this not because she was worried about Yun Luo Feng. In fact, she hoped Yun Luo Feng would die as soon as possible. But from what she knew of Xuanhuan, if First Elder agreed, he would surely take Yun Luo Feng to the forbidden area in the back mountain himself. So, even though she hated Yun Luo Feng's guts, she still didn't want First Elder to agree to her request. Xuanhuan was a little impatient. First Elder has agreed. Why are you making a fuss? The queen stiffened and slightly lowered her head. She looked aggrieved and bit her lips tightly. After quite a while, Yun Luo Feng's languid voice resounded. I'll go to the forbidden area alone. You just need to show me the way. Xuanhuan paused and said worriedly, Miss Yun, the forbidden area is too dangerous. If you go there alone, I'll be worried. Yun Luo Feng helped him and found out the murderer of his beloved woman. How could he sit by and watch her going to the dangerous place alone? You can't help me and will only hold me back, young Luo Feng said flatly, so I'm going there alone. Both First Elder and the Queen were relieved to hear her words. Neither of them wanted Xuanhuan to be involved in this matter. Otherwise, it was quite troublesome to select another king. Miss Yun, I'll send a guard to escort you to the forbidden area. First Elder smiled and said politely, his tone not as harsh as just now. Young Luo Feng didn't answer him. To be honest, she didn't like people here except Xuanhuan. As for the adventure to the forbidden area in the back mountain, she did it for herself. When the guard left with young Luo Feng, First Elder withdrew his gaze, turned to Xuanhuan and said solemnly, Your Majesty, come with me. Xuanhuan nodded and followed him into the Council of Elders. At this moment, no one noticed that the Queen, who was standing by Xuanhuan just now, had disappeared. In the Council of Elders, all the elders were standing quietly and solemnly. Xuanhuan was a little apprehensive and wondered what would happen. First Elder and the other elders looked at each other, and looked at Xuanhuan and sighed, Your Majesty, we've been hiding something from you, which is the last words of our ancestor. Last words? Xuanhuan, stunned, asked, What are they? First Elder pondered for a while. Our ancestors' last words are that whoever leads us to leave this place is a God-sent savior who came to save us. That's why I kept asking you to hold gods in awe and veneration over the years. First Elder, you mean? Xuanhuan looked up at First Elder in astonishment. If young Luo Feng really finds a way out from the forbidden area, she is the one the gods sent to save our country. Chapter 1553. Forbidden Area in the Back Mountain 3. First Elder shook his head and sighed helplessly. Even if she does, she can't be the one because she is so disrespectful to gods. Xuanhuan could not help clenching his fist and glancing at the window in front of him, with a touch of worry in his eyes. He certainly hoped that young Luo Feng was the one First Elder mentioned, and then she would survive. In the palace, a beautiful woman fidgeted, and her face was filled with worry. Just then, a maid hurried in, knelt down in front of the woman, and respectfully reported, Your Highness, just now I overheard the conversation of First Elder and His Majesty. Then the maid reported the contents of their conversation to her word by word. The Queen lowered her eyes and pondered. After quite a while, she gave a sneer. A God-sent savior who can take us out of here. So if anyone can find a way out, they would be treated as a god. The maid lowered her head and said in a respectful voice, Yes, First Elder did say so. The Queen rolled her eyes, her grim eyes sparkling with a malevolent light. For some reason, she had a hunch that young Luo Feng's arrival might be destined. Maybe she could really take them out of here. No, I can't just sit around. Only I can be the Queen. And the most respected woman must be me. Only in this way could she stand beside the king. If young Luo Feng died, that would be fine. But if she succeeded, First Elder would probably force her to give way to young Luo Feng in order to win her over. At that time, how could she refuse? To defend her position and her husband, she must do something. At this moment, the Empress forgot what Lin Yuyu said before she died. All she knew was that young Luo Feng must die. Your Highness, the imperial maid paused and got up her courage. Young Luo Feng has already gone to the forbidden area in the back mountain. Without First Elder's consent, we can't go to the back mountain. It doesn't matter, the Queen smiled insidiously, I have a way to enter it. If it were before, the Queen would not risk her own life, but now, for her husband, she could not care so much. Xiao Chun, I'm going to the back mountain now. If His Majesty comes to see me, you must stop him. Yes, Your Highness. Xiao Chun lowered her head again and responded respectfully. With that, the Queen quickly walked out and hurried to the back mountain. At the entrance to the back mountain, seeing the Queen quickly coming towards them, two guards hurriedly blocked her way with their swords and said expressionlessly, Your Highness, no one can enter the back mountain without the consent of First Elder. The Queen scowled and snapped, Don't you dare stand in my way. I came here by the order of First Elder. Get out of my way. Your Highness, I'm sorry, but you can't enter the back mountain unless you show me the token of First Elder. The Queen sneered, First Elder only has one token and he has given it to Miss Yun. Where can I find another one for you? Well, the guards were speechless and looked at each other, doubting the truth of the Queen's words. The Queen's eyes turned colder. To tell you the truth, I came here because First Elder regretted and asked me to bring Miss Yun back. If Miss Yun dies in the back mountain because of you, can you bear the responsibility? Chapter 1554. Forbidden Area in the Back Mountain 4. The two guards looked at each other in bewilderment and then said, Your Highness, please wait a moment. Let's go ask First Elder. If he agrees, we'll let you in. Hearing this, the queen frowned and looked more impatient. The queen flicked her sleeves hard and shouted harshly, Okay, I'll be waiting for you here. But when you come back, Miss Yun will have died. At that time, if First Elder wants to find out who is to blame, you shall bear the responsibility. Hearing this, the guards shuddered, and then they clenched their teeth and said, Your Highness, please come back soon. With that said, they parted and made way. The queen snorted and strode in. The moment she walked into the back mountain, a triumphant smile rose on her lips. In the back mountain, in front of a cave, a girl stopped her steps. Vaguely, she felt a powerful aura coming from the cave, and she still heard the howling of a dragon from it. If I'm right, the forbidden area is in the cave. Young Luo Feng pondered for a moment and slowly walked into the cave. As she entered the cave, she found herself facing a heat wave that was almost pushing her out. Master, I feel a very strong power in this cave. The puppet hasn't recovered well enough to block attacks for you. Take care. Young Luo Feng stroked the jade pendant, which was tied to her neck, with a smile over her lips. Okay. In fact, the jade pendant could withstand a deadly attack for her, or else she wouldn't risk coming here. As she went deeper, the heat wave became more and more intense and was so hot it seemed as if it could bake people to ashes. Soon. Young Luo Feng stopped and turned her eyes to the front, her eyes full of surprise and bewilderment. That is, quote. In a huge deep pit, an ice-blue water dragon was bound by a massive iron chain. Its body was transparent and it was giving out extremely sad roars. Around it there were bright red flames. Being tortured by the hot flames, the water dragon seemed to be in great agony. In theory, water could restrain fire. However, the fire under the body of the water dragon didn't go out but instead burned into its soul. Standing in front of the deep pit, young Luo Feng could feel its soul trembling. Master, watch out. Seeing the huge waves of flame pouncing on her, Xiao Mo nervously shouted. Having her reverie broken, young Luo Feng moved aside and dodged them. At this moment, a cold sweat broke out on her back. If the waves hit her, she would die immediately. No one would be able to save her. Master, the fierce flame is the fire of reincarnation that will never go out. You'll die even if a spark of it splatters on you. It's strange that the spirit of the water dragon doesn't die out after staying in the flames for so long. Tut tut. As soon as Xiao Mo finished, Bi Xiao gave a sardonic smile. Haven't you found out why? The water dragon's soul still exists after staying in this soul flame for so long because it has devoured many souls in addition to its own strength. It uses these souls to restore its own soul. Bi Xiao was the tree of life. She usually stayed silent in the God Code world, but now she could not help cutting in. Chapter 1555. Forbidden Area in the Back Mountain 5. Master, those people couldn't go back from here, because they became the nutrient of the water dragon. To avoid such a fate, let's leave here. Young Luo Feng fell silent. She had a feeling that the water dragon was the key for them to leave this place. However, not to mention the fierce fire of reincarnation, the water dragon alone was not something she could resist. Master, be careful. Suddenly, Xiao Mo's anxious voice came from her soul. Young Luo Feng raised her head only to see that the water dragon was staring at her with its fierce eyes, and a powerful attractive force came from its slightly opened mouth. The attraction force was like a hand, trying to pull her soul into the mouth, and the opened mouth of the water dragon was like a bottomless black hole. Young Luo Feng clenched her fists. She felt like being pressed by a huge mountain. Unable to move, she could only stare at the water dragon's gaping mouth. However, at this moment, a sneer came from behind her. Young Luo Feng, I finally found you. Go to hell. Young Luo Feng turned her head around only to see the queen suddenly appear behind her. She reached out her hand and pushed young Luo Feng into the sea of flames. At this moment, young Luo Feng had no time to think about how the queen came here without being noticed by her. Nor did she have the time to think why the queen could come to the back mountain. All she knew was that there were endless dangers waiting for her below. Crack. The jade pendant on her neck was split in two, the rope attached to it broke at the same time, and the jade pendant fell into the flames. Roar. Seeing its food fall down, the water dragon ignored the queen standing in front of the deep pit whose face was filled with a triumphant smile. It wrapped young Luo Feng with its tail and its ice blue eyes were tinged with greed. The continent of 7 provinces. In a remote town, a couple was sitting in an inn for a rest. Of these two, the man in a brocade robe looked gentle and cultivated, and the woman, with her hair tied up with a red ribbon, was valiant and bearing and charming. Her fiery red robe was gently fluttering in the breeze. Suddenly, the woman in red turned pale and stood up in shock. The man paused, looked tenderly at the woman in red and asked, "What happened?" The woman in red clenched her fists. "Do you remember the jade pendant I gave to Fenger when I first met her?" She took a deep breath. "I had worn that jade pendant since childhood. I have a telepathic connection to it. I gave it to Fenger because the jade pendant could not only save her life but also let me know if she is still alive." The man's heart throbbed. He stood up and asked worriedly, "You mean? I can feel that the jade pendant has broken." The jade pendant was broken. They knew what it meant. It meant that young Luo Feng was having a fatal crisis. "I'm going to find Fenger and shower." The woman in the red looked domineering and her voice sounded resolute. "If I find out the one who dares to touch my daughter-in-law, I will torture her to death." At the same time, Grandfather Jun, who was teaching his disciple at the Jun family, seemed to feel something and spat out a mouthful of blood. Chapter 1556. Forbidden Area in the Back Mountain 6. Master. Jun Zan's face greatly changed and he held Grandfather Jun's arms in panic. He was so worried that he almost cried out, "Master, it's my fault. I shouldn't make you so angry. Look, you even spit out blood. I promise I will obey you in everything and never make you angry." Jun Zan thought Grandfather Jun spat out blood because he was too angry at him. However, Grandfather Jun's face was pale and sad. "Fenger is dead." "What?" Jun Zan widened his eyes in shock and stared at Grandfather Jun. "It's impossible. You've given her the soul jade pendant. If she is in danger, she can break the jade pendant and you'll go save her. But she hasn't broken it, so I think she is safe." Grandfather Jun shook his head sadly. "If Fenger really breaks the soul jade pendant, it means the danger she encountered can be solved. The fact that she didn't even touch the jade pendant proves that even if I show up, I won't be able to save her. From what I know of her, she wouldn't get me involved if she knew she was going to die." Besides the jade pendant gifted by Jun Fengling, young Luo Feng also carried a soul jade pendant that Grandfather Jun gave to her before she left with her. It was because of this soul jade pendant that Grandfather Jun sensed that young Luo Feng was in deadly peril. Maybe she no longer existed in this world. 2 lines of tears ran down from Grandfather Jun's eyes. "If I had known this, I wouldn't have let her go to the God Burial Mountain alone." In the corner of the courtyard, Jun Linger hid behind the wall. Maybe Grandfather Jun was so sad that he didn't realize that Jun Linger had heard his words. At this moment, Jun Linger was trembling all over, her face covered with tears. Sister Yun died. Sister Yun, who protected her from Xiao Yikan, was dead. That was impossible. How could Sister Yun, who was so powerful and domineering, die? Grandpa must be lying. Jun Linger tightly bit her lips, turned around and walked outside the Jun family. She just walked a few steps before she was caught by a hand behind her. "Linger, where are you going?" Jun Linger trembled, with her back to the man behind, and a resolute gleam flickered across her slightly lowered eyes. "Yifei, I'm just going out for a walk." Quote. "Go out for a walk? I think you're going to God Burial Mountain, right?" Hua Yifei stared at Jun Linger intently. Under his stare, Jun Linger had nowhere to hide. "Yifei, I just want to check whether Sister Yun is really dead." "No, it's too dangerous. You can't go there." Hua Yifei tightly held Jun Ling's hand and said. Jun Linger looked sad, and her lank body looked even a bit piteous. Even so, her voice was still resolute. "When Xiao Yikan bullied me, she was the one who stood up to protect me. Even my father asked me to just endure Xiao Yikan, but she insisted on giving Xiao Yikan a lesson. Yifei, in this world, besides Grandpa, only you and her would stand beside me regardless of everything. Even my father can't do this. Junlinger didn't mean to blame Junzan. After all, as master of the Jun family, Junzan had to consider a lot of things. She just wanted to tell Hua Yifei the reason why she had to go to the God Mountain. Linger. Chapter 1557, Forbidden Area in the Back Mountain 7. Hua Yifei felt his heart skip a beat. Just then, Junlinger suddenly turned her head around and kissed his lips. The sudden movement stunned Hua Yifei, and then dizziness came over him and he stumbled. Linger, you, quote. Bang. Hua Yifei didn't finish speaking when he fell on the ground and lost all his senses. Yifei, I'm sorry, but I have to go to God Burial Mountain. She wiped the corners of her mouth, turned and walked out, not even looking back at Hua Yifei. She was afraid that one more look would make her reluctant to leave. Young Master Yifei, young Master Yifei. A passing servant, seeing Hua Yifei lying unconsciously on the ground, cried out anxiously, "Come on, young Master Yifei has fainted." At the moment, Grandfather Jun was still in grief. Hearing the servant's voice, he had no time to recover from the pain before he walked quickly to the front yard. Master, Yifei, what's going on? Junzan frowned. Crises came one after another. Whether young Luo Feng was alive or dead remained unknown, and Hua Yifei suddenly fell into a coma. By the way, where is Linger? Normally, if Hua Yifei fainted, Junlinger would surely be the first to come to him. But why hadn't she shown up now today? Grandfather Jun straightened up and waved, asking servants to take Hua Yifei to his room. You don't need to look for Linger, he said to Junzan. Master. Junzan looked at Grandfather Jun in surprise. What did Master mean? Yifei fell into a coma because he was drugged. By Linger. What? Junzan was dumbfounded. Linger and Hua Yifei were in love with each other. Why did she drug him? Grandfather Jun shook his head in a wry smile. If I have guessed correctly, Linger must have gone to God Burial Mountain because she overheard our conversation and heard that Fenger had died. Junzan's face immediately changed, and he hurriedly ordered, "Guards, find Miss and bring her back home." Grandfather Jun didn't stop Junzan. He was too old to bear the pain of losing another family member. Xuanhuan, please take care of the Jun family for me. I will be away for some time. Master, where are you going? Grandfather Jun took a deep breath, suppressed the surging grief in his heart, and slowly said, I must find Fenger no matter whether she is dead or alive. Even if Fenger is dead, I will take her body out of God Burial Mountain and bury her. Master. Junzan hugged Grandfather Jun in fright and said nervously, You can't go there. The Jun family can't go on without you. And I don't want to lose you. Alas. Grandfather Jun sighed and slowly raised his hand as if he was going to stroke Junzan's head. Although Junzan was so dignified and commanding in the Jun family, he was always like a child before his master, so it was not surprising that Grandfather Jun would do this. Master. Junzan's eyes were filled with tears. He raised his head and waited for the caress of his master. However, what awaited him was not the caress of his master. With a thud, Grandfather Jun's hand hit him hard on the forehead. Junzan immediately saw stars. He felt dizzy and fell backward. Before he fell into unconsciousness, Junzan just said, Master, you're so cruel to me. Chapter 1558, Forbidden Area in the Back Mountain 8. Looking at Junzan who had fallen to the ground, Grandfather Jun turned to the Jun family people and ordered flatly, Take him to his room, and he'll wake up in half a day. Yes, old master. The Jun family people responded, the corners of their mouths twitching. They finally figured out who Miss learned from. Staying with old master for so many years, she had become as crude as old master. Miss drugged Hua Yifei, and then old master knocked master out. Grandfather Jun slowly turned around and walked to the door. God Burial Mountain, the forbidden area in the back mountain. Inside the huge deep pit, the fiery red flames were dancing wildly. She slowly opened her eyes and looked at her own hand, her wicked eyes filled with surprise. Haven't I died yet? When she came back to herself, she found herself in a protective circle where no flame could reach her. Master, this is the effect of the jade pendant that Jun Fengling gave to you. The protective barrier can only last for a small period of time, during which no attack will be able to injure you. However, once this time is over, you won't have any other way to resist the flames. Luo Feng only knew the jade pendant could block a fatal attack for her but didn't know how. Now she realized that there was a seal in the jade pendant. Once she was in danger, the seal would automatically unlock and produce a protective barrier to protect her. Xiao Xiao, can you resist the fire of reincarnation for me for a while? Luo Feng pondered for a while and asked, if I'm not disturbed by it, I may have a chance to subdue the water dragon. Outside the protective film, the water dragon was staring menacingly at Luo Feng. His ferocious eyes were greedy and angry. The food, which had almost fallen into his mouth, flew away in such a way that no one would feel happy. Master, Xiao's clear voice slowly rang, my tree of life can protect you from the fire of reincarnation for a quarter of an hour, but remember, you only have a quarter of an hour, and once the time is over, I can't help you. A quarter of an hour. Luo Feng slightly nodded, that's enough. At this point, the film that was protecting her was fading away as if it would disappear at any moment. The water dragon became excited because he could imagine how the soul of this woman would become its food. Pop. The protective film burst like a bubble, and at the same time, a pale green light surrounded Luo Feng. It dispersed the flames that were going to devour her and kept her cool and comfortable. Roar. Although surprised by the retreat of the fire of reincarnation, the water dragon didn't hesitate much and rushed violently towards Luo Feng. Luo Feng was blown away by his huge tail. With a blech, she vomited a mouthful of blood and turned pale. She wiped the blood from her lower mouth and looked at the giant dragon with wariness and resolution. You're just the soul of a giant dragon. I will be able to subdue you. Provoked by Luo Feng, the water dragon became angrier and his eyes were filled with rage. He fiercely shook the iron chain around his body, and it clattered. Chapter 1559, Hot as Ice 1. Roar. The water dragon let out a roar and swung his tail at Luo Feng, trying to kill the woman in front of him. Bang. Luo Feng was thrown back and hit the rock wall hard. She lifted her head and wiped the blood from her lower mouth. Her mocking eyes were filled with amusement. Come again. In an instant, she rushed to the front of the water dragon, grabbed the horns of the dragon and climbed up to his head. Roar. The water dragon became furious and spat a mouthful of flames. However, Luo Feng had climbed onto his head, so the flames just hit the wall and were devoured by the fire of reincarnation. If you were still alive, I might fear you, but you are only a soul now. In the beginning, the water dragon didn't take the woman in white seriously. He shook his head desperately, trying to shake her off his head. But then, he was scared by the woman's next move. The woman laid down on his head to keep her balance, and then opened her mouth, bit at his head, tore a piece of his soul off, and chewed and swallowed it. OWWW. The intense pain made the water dragon tremble all over. He could not help but wail. His whole body was twisted in pain and he shook his body desperately to get Luo Feng off his head. However, the woman still tightly held onto his horns and gnawed at his soul. Since you want to devour my soul, I shall devour yours first. Tear. Another sharp pain. The water dragon was no longer as domineering and unruly as it used to be. He looked at her with pleading eyes and whined miserably. He seemed to be begging for mercy, begging Luo Feng to let it go. Let you go? Luo Feng sneered, if it was me who was defeated, would you let me go? If she lost, she would surely be devoured by the water dragon. Then she'd rather devour his soul first. OWWW. The water dragon hit the rock wall hard with his body in agony, and his voice became more angry and painful. If Luo Feng hadn't climbed onto his head, he would have cut this woman into pieces. Feeling the killing intent of the water dragon, Luo Feng gnawed at his soul more and more quickly. Gradually, the water dragon's spirit sagged. Not resisting her attacks as fiercely as just now, he looked so weak as if he would disappear at any time. Seeing the water dragon no longer be able to resist her, Luo Feng brought out the gold-seeking hamster tribe. In an instant, numerous gold-seeking hamsters surrounded the water dragon, bit its soul with sharp teeth, and ate it with gusto. Soon, the whole water dragon had been digested in the stomachs of Yun Luofeng and the gold-seeking hamsters. When Yun Luofeng took the hamsters back to the God Code world, she suddenly felt that there was a powerful force racing through her body. Master, hurry up, sit down and suppress the power of the water dragon, or else your body may explode. Xiao Mo's anxious voice came out. This time, Yun Luofeng was really too impulsive. Unlike gold-seeking hamsters, she couldn't directly digest the soul of the water dragon. If not handled properly, the power contained in this soul would explode within her body. Not having time to ponder, Yun Luofeng hurriedly sat down with her knees crossed and tried to digest the power in her body, ignoring the fire of reincarnation. Chapter 1560, Hot as Ice 2. No. Bi Xiao felt her heart sink. Her power couldn't resist the fire of reincarnation for long. If Yun Luofeng didn't leave soon, the fire of reincarnation would devour her in an instant. However, it was too late for her to leave the pit, and the soul power within her body might explode. At this time, Bi Xiao felt that the fire of reincarnation around Yun Luofeng was about to move. A moment later, when the green light surrounding Yun Luofeng disappeared, the fire of reincarnation instantly went up and buried her in the deep pit. Not as frightened as Bi Xiao and the others, Xiao Mo looked calm, but his bright eyes were still filled with nervousness and anxiety. If it were before, Master will be wiped out by the fire of reincarnation right away. However, don't forget that the water dragon has lived here for so many years, which proves his soul is very powerful. Therefore, after devouring his soul, Master won't be killed so easily. Quote. Xiao Mo tightly clenched his fists and pondered. I asked Master to absorb the soul of the water dragon because the fire of reincarnation will suppress the power of the water dragon. If Master can hold on, she will be able to improve her strength to a higher level, but if she can't. Xiao Mo suddenly shuddered, but a confident gleam flickered across his eyes. No, my master will be able to make it. At the foot of the back mountain, the queen ran down the mountain in a hurry. However, at this time, she saw Xuanhuan rushing towards her, followed by a lot of guards. She felt her heart skip a beat and turned ghastly pale. Your Majesty, quote. Xuanhuan angrily rushed up to her, slapped her hard on the cheek and shouted angrily, who allowed you to enter the back mountain? The queen tightly bit her lips and burst into tears. She covered her face with her hands, her eyes so sad. This was the first time the emperor slapped her. For Yun Luofeng. Luckily, the woman had died and no one would be able to steal her husband from her. Thinking of this, the queen lowered her eyes, and a grim and ferocious gleam flashed through her eyes. Guards, tie the empress up and send her to the Council of Elders to receive punishment. Xuanhuan coldly glanced at the queen, flicked his sleeves hard and walked away. The Council of Elders. It was quiet and solemn. Looking at the queen who was tied up, Elder first said slowly, Queen, aren't you going to give me an explanation? The queen bit her lips tightly. First Elder, I was worried about Miss Yun, so I went to the back mountain to stop her, but I didn't find her, so I came back. First Elder wouldn't agree with the king to divorce her, but the king disliked her and would never look at her. So she must not admit what she had done. Queen, even if you didn't do anything wrong, you have to be punished because you went to the back mountain without permission. First Elder said harshly and his eyes were chilly. Guards, lock her up. She shall ponder over her mistakes for the next 3 months. Yes, First Elder. 2 guards came forward and beckoned the queen, Your Highness, this way please. The queen smiled sadly and gazed at Xuanhuan, her eyes so grieved. Your Majesty, whatever I do, it's for you, but you hurt me every time. Xuanhuan paused and looked at her only to see the queen's beautiful, piteous eyes. Even though he had no feelings for this woman, he felt guilty at this moment. Chapter 1561, Hot as Ice 3. Queen, you shouldn't go to the forbidden area anyway. Xuanhuan shook his head and gave a helpless sigh. Your Majesty, I know you value Miss Yun very much. Therefore, I risked my life, trying to persuade her to come back. If I broke the rules, I am willing to receive the punishment. Saying this, the queen didn't look at Xuanhuan anymore. She looked just like a warrior who was going to the battlefield, determined and unrepentant. Xuanhuan felt guiltier. He thought that the queen went to the back mountain to do something bad to young Luo Feng. Now he knew he misunderstood her. Thinking how he was angry at her just now, he really felt guilty. His beloved woman had passed away years ago. He was supposed to take good care of her sister, but he always treated her coldly. At this moment, Xuanhuan had decided that he would treat the queen better in the future. There weren't many good-hearted women like her in the world. Your Majesty, First Elder sighed and said sincerely, Queen did break the rules, so I punished her. But as you can see, she did all this for you. I hope you can treat her better in the future. Yes, First Elder. Xuanhuan responded respectfully and couldn't help turning his eyes to the receding figure of the queen. Pondering for a while, he ordered, guards, all sleep in the queen's palace tonight. Prepare for it. Since they married 2 years ago, they had been living apart. However, greatly moved by the queen's behavior, he thought he should cherish the one he was with. The huge deep pit was like a huge beast's mouth. The rolling flames could instantly devour people and annihilate them. Now, in the flames, young Luo Feng sat cross-legged, her frowning brows revealing her pain. What was as hot as ice? No one would know it better than young Luo Feng. The left part of her body was covered with a flame, and the right part was turned into blue water, which was not cool but chilly. Yes, it was chilly. She shivered as if she was in a severe winter. However, the left part of her body was like being burned by a sea of fire, and the sharp pain went deep into her soul and didn't dissipate. Boom. Suddenly, the blue water turned into a water dragon, and fiercely fought the beast formed by the flames in the deep pit. As the water dragon and the beast were neck and neck in strength, it was a pitched battle. Previously, the water dragon's body was bound by the iron chain, so he was unable to exert his full strength. Young Luo Feng didn't know that the water dragon was so powerful until now. If he were still alive, no one would be able to resist him on this continent. However, no matter how strong the water dragon was, it was no match for the fiery beast. Although water could quench fire, the fiery beast still gained the upper hand of the battle. If the water dragon and the flame reached a balance in young Luo Feng's body, perhaps the crisis would be resolved. However, if any party gained the upper hand, he would defeat the other and devour young Luo Feng. Young Luo Feng made up her mind and ordered, all of you, except Huahuo, pass on your power to me. Huahuo was not included because she was a spirit beast with fire attribute. Instead of helping her, she would increase the power of the fire of reincarnation. Chapter 1562, Hot as Ice 4. Yes, Master. In an instant, several powerful forces passed onto her body from her soul. Young Luo Feng hurriedly gathered all the forces together and passed them on to the body of the water dragon. As the water dragon gave out a roar, its strength grew rapidly. Though he was at a disadvantage before, he was soon tied in strength with the fiery beast. Suck. As young Luo Feng shouted, the water dragon and the beast immediately disappeared and were sucked into her body. Through her consciousness, she could see that there were 2 light spots in her soul. One was red and the other was blue. The 2 light spots stayed on either side and were eyeing each other covetously, waiting for a chance to defeat the other party. Perhaps because young Luo Feng had tamed the fiery beast, the surrounding flames quickly moved aside and made a way for her. Master, I don't know if this is a blessing or a curse, Xiao said helplessly. Although we help the water dragon, we can't help him all the time. If he is defeated by the fire of reincarnation, your soul will immediately turn to ashes. Young Luo Feng asked after pondering for a while, what's the solution? You can find something with the water attribute to increase the strength of the water dragon. Then they will reach a balance even though they both live in your body. Young Luo Feng, as a human, couldn't digest the water dragon, so she could only suppress it with the fire of reincarnation. Although some of the water dragon was devoured by the gold-seeking hamsters, those souls could not exert much influence on it. Even so, the water dragon was no match for the fiery beast. Boom. Boom, boom, boom. Suddenly, lightning flashed and thunder rumbled, and a powerful spirit energy rushed into young Luo Feng's body. Young Luo Feng quickly sat cross-legged, letting the fierce gale whip up her pitch-black hair. Master, congratulations, you finally broke through to the Sage Lord level. On the continent of 7 provinces, only Sage Lord level spirit cultivators were qualified to stand above all beings. At the same time, people of the country all heard the loud noise on the back mountain. They all turned their eyes to the back mountain. Above the back mountain, a whirlpool hovered in the sky that contained infinite power and great pressure. Under its pressure, the people who were not powerful enough couldn't even stand up straight. The back mountain. Xuanhuan and the queen were watching. Compared with the man beside her who looked excited, the queen was nervous and worried. Why did this happen? Who would have a breakthrough in the uninhabited back mountain? Was it young Luo Feng? No. That was impossible. Young Luo Feng was dead. It couldn't be her. As the queen was anxiously thinking, footsteps came from behind her. Xuanhuan turned his head only to see the elders had come, and he respectfully said, "First elder, you've come." First elder looked very excited. He stared at the storm above the back mountain without blinking. He was so excited that his voice changed. It's a great thing that someone in our country has finally broken through to Sage Lord level after all these years. I just don't know who it is. Is there a strong master of our country living in seclusion on the back mountain? This was possible. He prohibited anyone from entering the back mountain, but that didn't mean there wasn't anyone living in it. After all, the ban was issued about a decade ago. Maybe someone was living in the back mountain before that. After all, he didn't search the back mountain for survivors because he thought it was too dangerous. Chapter 1563, Hot as Ice 5. Therefore, there must be someone living in seclusion on the back mountain, who had broken through to Sage Lord level. He didn't think it was young Luo Feng, because she didn't show her power when she came to the country. A Sage Lord level spirit cultivator was so powerful. How could she, a young woman, break through to this level? This was completely impossible. Swish. At that moment, a sudden and powerful force came and made everyone shiver. They looked up only to see a black figure rushing through the sky and stopping in front of them. It was a very handsome man whose cold eyes were as sharp as an eagle's eyes. He stood in the sky, with his hands clasped behind him. He looked down at them like a king standing high above all beings. No figure was reflected in this man's cool and deep eyes. He was too cold to get close to. The moment the queen saw the man, she was stunned. She thought that the king was the most handsome man in the world and no man could match him. However, compared with the cool and powerful man in front of her, Xuanhuan was as small as the dust on the ground. If she hadn't fallen in love with the king and had met this man first, she would probably fall in love with him. However, she already had Xuanhuan in her heart. No matter how outstanding this man was, he couldn't touch her heart. Thinking of this, the queen turned her head and affectingly gazed at Xuanhuan. "Who are you?" First elder scowled. This man was not from their country. Otherwise, he would remember such a powerful man. The man didn't speak. Pursing his lips, he gazed affectionately at the storm above the back mountain. His cold eyes were filled with tenderness. "Are you the one who made the breakthrough on the back mountain?" First elder asked, frowning. He asked this, because since this man appeared, the storm gradually diminished, which meant that the breakthrough had been finished. But why was he looking at that place as if there was someone there? More puzzlingly, why did such a mysterious man suddenly appear in their country? "Young master," Xuanhuan frowned, "are you?" "Go away." The man shouted coldly and became cold and unapproachable again, not as tender as before. He coldly glanced at Xuanhuan, his face expressionless. "Your Majesty, he's so rude." The queen angrily stamped her foot and looked up at the cold man on the sky. "This is the territory of our country. You are a stranger here. You should explain why you are here, or else we will kill you." The man remained cold and ignored the queen as if a single glance at her would soil his eyes. The queen blushed with anger. Just when she was going to curse, she saw a small head popped up from the man's shoulder. It was an emerald green bug that was so beautiful that people would want to put it in their hand and carefully appreciate it. However, the bug's eyes seemed to be filled with contempt. Yes, contempt. It was like it was laughing at the queen's stupidity. "Your Majesty, how dare they?" The queen clenched her fist in anger. Even a little bug dared to despise her. Chapter 1564, Little Bug Weeping Without Tears 1. Xuanhuan raised his hand, stopping the empress while his vigilant gaze looked at the black-robed man standing in the skies. Not knowing the reason, this man gave him a dangerous feeling, as if the entire country could be exterminated with a wave of his hand. The man's unapproachable gaze gradually turned gentle, as he looked towards the skies before him. A faint arc unconsciously quirked up on his lips. His smile was very faint, to the extent of being undetectable. Even so, that faint smile was still imprinted in everyone's eyes. Everyone had followed the man's gaze and looked in the same direction, perhaps wanting to know why this ice-cold man had such a huge transformation. Just as their gaze shifted over, a snow-white long robe came into view. Her white robes were purer than snow, and she had an extremely gorgeous appearance. Her devilish aura had disappeared the instant she saw the man who was standing in the air. Meeting each other's eyes, there were indescribable tender sentimental feelings between them. The man slightly extended his arms as his black robes flew in the breeze. His serious gaze filled with gentleness stared at the white-robed lady not far away, seemingly wanting to carve her figure into his mind. Suddenly, the young lady ran towards the man and dashed into his embrace. The man tightly embraced the woman's thin waist, giving her an unforgettable kiss in the sky. 3 years. They had been separated for 3 years. Within these 3 years, no one knew how he had endured it. If he hadn't believed firmly that young Luo Feng wasn't dead, then it would be impossible for him to continue going on. The queen's complexion turned pale from shock. Young Luo Feng wasn't dead. How was this possible? Furthermore, looking at the situation, young Luo Feng and that black-robed man were lovers. Then what were her previous actions considered to be? If she knew earlier that young Luo Feng had a lover, why was there a need to deal with her so persistently? Thinking of this, the queen couldn't refrain from biting her lips as her body started trembling. Right now, everyone was looking at the pair of lovers kissing in the skies and no one noticed the queen's peculiarity. This girl's strength seems to have changed drastically. Surprise could be seen from the head elder's expression. Our guess was wrong and the person who broke through was this girl. From the start, the head elder was also unable to determine young Luo Feng's strength. At that time, she had not caused him to feel restraining fear, but at this moment she gave him a feeling of profound mystery. It was to the extent that he feared her aura. What did this mean? It meant that young Luo Feng had attained the Sage Lord level realm. I finally found you. The man's voice contained magnetism and was hoarse, while filled with seduction as before. Yun Xiao, I missed you. Her heartfelt words caused the man's expression to change subtly. He tightly hugged her and once again kissed her fiercely. After a long time later, he loosened his embrace while his lips quirked up and his expressionless ice-cold face was similar to a melted ice cube. Her inverted figure could be seen within his black eyes. Mistress, I finally got to meet you. You're more beautiful than I expected. The little bug on Yun Xiao's shoulder swayed its head and spoke to young Luo Feng in a fawning manner. Chapter 1565, Little Bug Weeping Without Tears 2. This was his master's lover. If he didn't try to please her, what if she commanded his master to abandon him in a fit of anger? Then who could he complain to? Young Luo Feng finally noticed the little guy on Yun Xiao's shoulder and questioned, a bug. The bug was somewhat discontented yet dare not show it and could only defend himself. I'm not a bug, I'm a dragon. A dragon. Young Luo Feng caressed her chin and shot a sideways glance at the bug while beaming with a big smile. Yun Xiao, I'm hungry. Her sinister and crafty expression caused the bug to shiver and he couldn't help but retreat with its 2 claws tightly covering his chest. I'm not tasty at all. Master. The bug who was afraid turned toward Yun Xiao and complained while feeling wronged, the mistress is thinking of eating your pet. Yun Xiao ignored little bug and looked at young Luo Feng in all seriousness. Do you prefer it steamed or fried? Crack. The little bug heard his heart breaking and became petrified, as if not believing its own ears. Huahuu, master, why don't you have any integrity? Mistress wants to eat me and you're handing me over with both hands. It hadn't seen enough of this world yet, it was about to be devoured by this heartless couple. At this moment, the little bug had never been so regretful as now. If presented with another chance, it would rather be sealed for thousands of years rather than follow Yun Xiao to leave that place. Young Luo Feng smiled. Her smile was very beautiful, to the extent of being emotionally moving. I feel that the bug's meat isn't nutritious enough. I'm a dragon, a dragon. Even though the little bug was worried about becoming young Luo Feng's food, at this very moment, for its dignity as a dragon, it had decided to stand up and defend its reputation. Yun Xiao, have you named this little guy? Young Luo Feng acted deaf and continued asking Yun Xiao. Not yet. In Yun Xiao's heart, he would only pay attention to young Luo Feng. Asking him to name a bug. Wait, a dragon? That was impossible. Then from now on, young Luo Feng narrowed her eyes, it shall be called Little Bug. No. Little Bug revealed despair as it looked towards Yun Xiao in pain. Master, I'm your pet, and you're so powerful and respected, so it's impossible you'll allow your pet to have such a retarded name. Otherwise, it's embarrassing, and in addition, I'm not a bug, I'm a dragon. Yun Xiao shot him a cold glance, then looked at young Luo Feng. Okay. At this moment, Little Bug felt his views shattering and wept without tears. At the same time, he understood that Yun Xiao would heed young Luo Feng in all aspects. Even if young Luo Feng asked him to jump a cliff, he would do so without second thoughts. Why did I encounter such an infatuated master? It was fine if he was infatuated, but why am I the one who is suffering? Little Bug wiped his tears and his expression was filled with despair towards this world. Seemingly recalling something, she asked, Yun Xiao, why are you here? Yun Xiao answered in all seriousness. I was chasing the surviving members of the Poison Valley and mistakenly stepped into the place that sealed Little Bug, accidentally sealing myself as well. I spent 3 years to break this seal and took spoils of war in passing. Young Luo Feng was silent for a moment, looking up at the man's handsome and grim face. Chapter 1566. Little Bug Weeping Without Tears 3. Reasonably speaking, originally we should have been trapped in this place, unable to leave. However, I have lifted the restriction on this country and so now we can leave. Her voice wasn't loud or soft but was heard by everyone. The restriction was that water dragon, and after it disappeared the restriction was also lifted. What? The head elder who heard her couldn't control his excitement. What did you say? Our country's restriction has been lifted. That's right. Young Luo Feng looked around at everyone. The restriction has been lifted, but it will depend on your own ability to leave God Burial Mountain. Furthermore, I have something to settle before I leave. When she spoke, her gaze slowly landed on the queen while a wicked smile surfaced on her lips, seemingly extremely sinister. The queen's complexion was as pale as snow and lacked color. Meeting young Luo Feng's sinister and eerie gaze, she retreated while her lips trembled. Boom. Spirit energy was released, causing the queen to fly out and crash at the rear of the crowd with a bang. Everyone was shocked, not understanding why young Luo Feng had attacked the queen. My queen. The head elder turned pale with fright, and his eyes filled with confusion landed on young Luo Feng. Miss Yun, what are you doing? The queen went looking for you in the rear mountain because she didn't wish for you to take the risk and intended to pull you back. Young Luo Feng snorted, and her slightly lifted eyes were wild and arrogant. Are you sure that's the case? In an instant, everyone's attention gathered on the queen, with a questioning look in their eyes. Could it be, had the empress done something inappropriate to young Luo Feng? Young Luo Feng can rely on my own abilities to stand at the peak. Why would I need to vie for the measly position of a concubine? Not to mention the queen's position, I don't even care if it's the position of the king. Her voice was incomparably arrogant, similar to a meteorite that fiercely rammed against everyone's hearts. However, you thought I wanted to snatch your position and did not hesitate to push me into the deep pit. If it weren't for my luck, I'm afraid I would have disappeared in that pit. Xuanhuan's body stiffened, slowly turning his head, his gray eyes contained fury and disbelief. Queen, can you provide me an explanation? No, it wasn't so, she's lying. Your Majesty, you have to believe in me. I love you deeply, so how could I commit such acts that harm others and injure myself? The queen knelt and crawled towards Xuanhuan, then tightly hugged his thighs and wept. Shutting his eyes, and opening them once again, his gaze was filled with grief. Why are you still lying at this point in time? There are no grudges between you and Miss Yun, so why would she attempt to frame you? The queen was speechless. If Yun Xiao hadn't appeared, she would have been certain of young Luo Feng pursuing Xuanhuan, but right now. This black-robed man was so outstanding, so how could young Luo Feng abandon such an excellent man and go after Xuanhuan? Seeing the queen silent, Xuanhuan sneered and pushed away her arms that hugged his thighs, with disappointment in his eyes. He thought that the queen was kind-hearted and had sacrificed everything for him discreetly, which caused him to visit her occasionally. Yet ultimately, he had been hoodwinked by her. Chapter 1567. Little Bug Weeping Without Tears 4. Kiki. The queen took a step back and revealed a desolate smile. Her tears flowed down from her eyes as she mocked herself. Your Majesty, me and you, along with my sister grew up together since we were young and I had already fallen for you at that time. However, you only had eyes for my sister. My appearance and strength were inferior compared to hers, and all the elders intended to crown her as the queen after you ascended the throne. But did you know how jealous I was at that time? Xuanhuan coldly looked at his queen. Therefore, you conspired to murder her. The queen's expression suddenly froze and became flustered. Looking at her sudden change of expression, the flames of fury in Xuanhuan's heart were ignited. It was really you who harmed her. Actually, Xuanhuan was only testing her with his questioning. In the past, he would never have suspected the queen, but now that her true colors had been exposed, he started to be skeptical. However, the queen's expression had proven everything. Boom. Xuanhuan's violent rage erupted and spared no effort to strangle the queen. His eyes were red through and through, radiating fury as he shouted, "She was your sister. You were orphaned since you were young and she was the one who raised you. How could you be so ruthless as to kill her?" The queen was strangled by him and unable to utter any words. Her face turned red from being choked while revealing despair. She did not regret killing her sister. To possess this man, she would rather kill everyone instead of allowing anyone to steal her man. However, the king's actions towards her had caused her heart to turn cold. All the elders stood by one side without stopping the king. Having committed such a grave mistake, the queen should be punished. Furthermore, they understood that the king would not kill the queen. At most, he would cripple her. In their country, there wasn't a precedent of the death penalty. As expected. After venting his anger, the king loosened his hands. His hands were still slightly trembling and his eyes contained hatred. Men, drag the queen away. Cripple her strength, and expel her from the country. Yes, Your Majesty. Just as the two bodyguards wanted to walk up, a powerful energy swooped down all of a sudden, penetrating the queen's body with a bang. The queen stiffened and widened her eyes in disbelief. Fresh blood spread from her chest and she suddenly froze before she collapsed. Your Majesty. Everyone was stunned and they looked up at the black-robed man standing in the sky. The man's black robes were lightly rippling along with the wind while this right hand gently embraced the white-robed lady. He was still as expressionless as before, while this look was incomparably callous. Young master, the head elder's expression was somewhat unsightly. The queen committed a crime and we had decided to punish her. However, isn't killing her too excessive? The man slightly lowered his eyes, looking down at everyone beneath him. His callous eyes were unyielding while releasing an austere killing aura, making them tremble with fear. Your country's original predetermined queen was murdered and you didn't avenge her. Even the man who loved her deeply did not severely punish the murderer. The man's voice was callous and low as before, however. Whoever dares to touch a single strand of hair on my wife's head shall have their blood spilled. So what if he killed? For her, he could slaughter the whole world, not to mention a woman. Xuanhuan's body somewhat froze. He lightly sighed, and a bitter smile surfaced on his handsome face. Chapter 1568. Meeting the Skeleton Troop Again 1. If he had the boldness of this man, would his beloved have avoided a premature death? Yun Xiao, let's go. Looking at the man's face, young Luo Feng gently smiled and her lazy voice sounded. All right. Yun Xiao met her gaze and smiled, as his arm embraced her waist. Taking a single step, he had already traveled 100 feet. Wait, the head elder anxiously called out. However, their figures had disappeared before he managed to speak. Head elder, we can finally leave this god-forsaken place. Everyone felt happy deep down, and only the head elder's countenance was of worry. The ancestor left this saying behind, whoever could lift the restriction was the person God had sent to us. Now that she has left, what should we do? Evidently, the head elder wasn't aware of the ancestor's intent for leaving behind that saying. It was to give his descendants hope. Even the ancestor himself didn't expect that a woman named Yun Luofeng would appear many years later, lifting the restriction of this country. On God Burial Mountain, underbrush was in abundance, and a powerful aura covered the whole mountain range. If someone weak was to come here, perhaps they would be immediately scared witless by the powerful aura present. One had to say that Yun Luofeng's luck was good. She encountered the skeleton troop the moment she arrived at the God Burial Mountain, and now that she intended to leave, she had once again encountered the skeleton troop who had formed teams. Looking at those skeletons who waved their bones and were dashing over at a high speed, Yun Xiao expressionlessly commanded Little Bug, who was napping. "Resolve this in the shortest time possible." Little Bug answered, and just as he intended to battle with the skeletons, Yun Luofeng stopped him. "I have a grudge against these skeletons." Yun Luofeng gave a wicked smile. "Therefore, I will dispose of them myself." She never forgot the time when she had been chased by these skeleton troops after she stepped onto God Burial Mountain. Right now, since she had broken through to Sage Lord level with great difficulty, she wanted to personally take revenge. Whoosh! After she spoke, she dashed towards the skeleton troop. She, who was once chased down and had to flee in disarray with a sorry figure, finally had the strength to deal with them at this moment. Even so, these skeletons couldn't be destroyed or feel pain. Even though Yun Luofeng had broken through to Sage Lord level, it was still slightly difficult if she wanted to exterminate this team of the undead. Not good. If this continues, sooner or later I won't be able to continue. Yun Luofeng fished out a spirit herb and swallowed it without chewing. Her originally depleted physical strength and spirit energy gradually recovered. Not far away, Yun Xiao fixed his eyes on Yun Luofeng's battle with a calm face. However, he was prepared. If Yun Luofeng couldn't defeat these skeletons, he would take action. "Xiaomo, do you know why these deceased became a skeleton troop?" Yun Luofeng cleaned the blood traces on her mouth and used spirit voice transmittance to ask. In her spirit, Xiaomo's voice immediately sounded. "I'm unclear of the specifics, but have you noticed that there's a moss green will-o-wisp in the eyes of every skeleton? They are all souls, but not the skeleton's souls." "Not the skeleton's souls?" Yun Luofeng's eyes flickered for a moment. Seemingly understanding something, she hastily shut her eyes. The noises in her surroundings instantly disappeared as if only she existed in this whole world. Chapter 1569. Meeting the skeleton troop again too. The instant those skeletons arrived, she opened her eyes and powerful energy abruptly exploded. Soon after, countless moss-green soul flames drifted into the skeleton troop's eyes. At that moment, the skeletons halted their actions while the two will-o-wisps of soul were endlessly contending against each other, vying for control. Yun Luofeng did not relax. Those souls she produced were from her own soul, and only by using the power of her own soul would she be able to control these skeletons. Of course, if Yun Luofeng hadn't devoured the water dragon's soul, she wouldn't be able to undertake this risky method to control the skeletons even if her own soul had grown. Finally, Yun Luofeng's soul flames had taken control, engulfing the opponent's soul flames. In the next instant, her body went soft and she fell into a warm embrace. Yun Xiao tightly embraced her while a trace of heartache flashed through his black eyes. "Yun Xiao, I'm fine," Yun Luofeng smiled. She knew what Yun Xiao wanted to say, and so before he opened his mouth, she said, "My soul can gradually recover, you don't have to worry. Furthermore, I didn't want to rely on you for everything, but to fight side by side with you." Frankly speaking, she could have had Yun Xiao subdue these puppets from the start. However, with his abilities, he could only cause these puppets to disappear. As such, it would be better to use them for her own sake, which was to increase her strength. At the same time, in the depths of God Burial Mountain, a woman seated cross-legged suddenly opened her eyes, spitting out a mouthful of blood. Her complexion was pale and fury could be seen in her eyes. Who swallowed my soul flames and snatched my skeleton troop? If I find the culprit, I'll never let them off." Her last few words were spoken with her teeth clenched together. Her own soul flame had been swallowed and she would have to cultivate for a long time to recover, so how would she forgive the person who did that? Yun Luofeng was unaware of what was happening in the depths of God Burial Mountain. After subduing the skeleton troop, she left the mountain together with Yun Xiao. However, she sensed that Mo Qiancheng in the witchcraft tribe's matrix had begun to stir, with a faint trend of leaving the matrix. This feeling caused young Luo Feng to shudder. Mo Qiancheng deeply loved Zhu Qian, and to save Ji Jutian and herself, she had passed herself off as Zhu Qian. If Mo Qiancheng were to leave the matrix and find out about Yun Xiao's existence, he would definitely go crazy. However, Mo Qiancheng was the matrix's central point, and according to reason, he shouldn't be able to leave the matrix, but why did he begin to stir? Young Luo Feng's fast-beating heart gradually calmed down. She had to increase her strength as fast as possible to deal with the following problems. In addition, she would never allow Mo Qiancheng to harm Yun Xiao in the slightest. Master, Xiao Mo also sensed this, and even his voice was faintly trembling. Now that matters are imminent, I have to increase my strength in this available time to be able to rival Mo Qiancheng. Young Luo Feng clenched her fist and revealed determination. Slightly raising his brow, Yun Xiao turned towards young Luo Feng and asked, "What happened?" Young Luo Feng was startled and recovered her senses. Her pitch-black eyes deeply gazed at the man before her while her tone was incomparably resolute. "Yun Xiao, I will absolutely never let you leave my side." Chapter 1570, Jun Fengling and Old Man Jun. It should be here. Not long after young Luo Feng left, a man and a woman slowly descended from the sky while they attentively watched God Burial Mountain ahead. The red-robed lady's looks were extremely gorgeous, valiant, and formidable-looking, while her appearance resembled Yun Xiao. The man was as gentle as jade, and his emotional eyes were filled with worry, so he did not forget to console the woman beside him. "Juner, I'm sure Fenger is safe. We'll go and look for her now." "I hope so. If I find out who injured my daughter-in-law, I'll burn their corpse and scatter their ashes." A dangerous glint streaked across Jun Fengling's narrowed eyes. Yi Jingchen's looked at Jun Fengling, and a faint curve quirked on his thin lips. "Juner, let's go." Just as they were about to enter God Burial Mountain, an aged voice suddenly sounded from the side, with traces of sigh and worry. "At that time, I should have stopped that girl from entering God Burial Mountain. I wonder if she has encountered any dangers." Old Man Jun revealed a bitter smile, while his voice contained helplessness. Jun Fengling subconsciously looked towards Old Man Jun. The moment she saw his aged face, she couldn't help but frown. She didn't know why, but this old man gave her a feeling of being close and familiar. This feeling made her want to become friends with him. Yi Jingchen evidently saw through his wife's internal thoughts and patted her shoulders, then walked towards Old Man Jun and spoke with his hands cupped together. "Senior, are you here to find someone?" Old Man Jun's line of sight fell on Yi Jingchen and replied with an aged voice, "That's right. May I know the person you're looking for is?" "My granddaughter." "Granddaughter?" Yi Jingchen stared blankly while internally feeling disappointed. Young Luo Feng had encountered dangers in God Burial Mountain, and since this old man was also here to look for someone, he assumed they would fortuitously be searching for the same person. Unexpectedly, this man was looking for his own granddaughter. Fenger's grandfather was young Luo, and this old man before him clearly did not come for Fenger. "Brother Yi," Jun Fengling walked to Yi Jingchen's side and turned to Old Man Jun with a smile. "Senior, if you don't mind, why don't we travel together?" If it was Yi Jingchen who invited him, the old man would definitely reject him. However, just as he saw the lady walking towards him, he became distracted. If his daughter was here, perhaps she would be the same age as the lady before him. But his daughter was still in the land of no return, so it was impossible for her to appear here. Sure, the old man wouldn't accept any stranger trying to worm their way into becoming his friend, but he was unable to feel malice toward the red-robed lady in front of him. Furthermore, subconsciously he wanted to get closer to her. Cough cough. Seeing Old Man Jun staring at his wife, he couldn't help but dryly cough, and his handsome face was clearly unsightly. Old Man Jun recovered his senses and had an awkward expression on his face. With his earlier expression, it was indeed easy for others to mistake him as a lecher. However, he couldn't restrain himself from wanting to look at her. It was only several days later that Jun Fengling and Old Man Jun understood what it meant when something was fated. In Luya town, the market was incomparably bustling, while the peddlers' shouts repeated continuously. From a distance, young Luo Feng spotted a familiar figure and was astonished. Chapter 1571, Meeting Huang Yingying again. 1. Huang Yingying, why was she here? Currently, perhaps sensing someone's gaze, she turned to look, and in that instant, she was struck dumb as her clear eyes stared blankly at young Luo Feng. Huang Yingying. The moment young Luo Feng called out her name, she suddenly trembled and hastily covered her trembling mouth, preventing herself from crying out in shock. Miss Yun, had she finally met her? All of a sudden, Huang Yingying's light yellow robe streaked across the distance between them and she stood before young Luo Feng. She stared intently at the white-robed lady, speaking every word clearly. You're really Miss Yun. I'm not dreaming, am I? Huang Yingying, why are you here? The lady's voice was even more mature and steady compared to 3 years ago. The only thing unchanged was her wicked voice. Miss Yun. Huang Yingying smiled. Her ice-cold face was similar to a melted ice cube and was full of warmth. At that time, after hearing news about you being alive, I went searching for you at the Jun family. However, I was too late and you had already left, so once again, I chased you to this location. I didn't expect that we would meet here. Frankly speaking, young Luo Feng didn't have very many sentimental feelings for Huang Yingying. At that time, she had helped her because they had a common enemy, not because of Huang Yingying herself. However, looking at Huang Yingying, her disappearing for 3 years hadn't been easy on her. The originally light-hearted young lady had unconsciously become cold and detached. Looking at her blossoming smile, young Luo Feng was moved. An unintentional help had helped her obtain someone who treated her with sincerity. Miss Yingying. Suddenly, an anxious voice sounded behind Huang Yingying, and in that instant, young Luo Feng clearly perceived her body stiffening. Just as young Luo Feng looked up, she saw a noble young master appearing alongside Huang Yingying with joy on his face. I thought my eyes failed me, but to think it's really you. Seeing that the noble man was about to pull her arm, she frowned and subconsciously dodged his hands and coldly said, Young Master Ling Shuang, please conduct yourself with dignity. His body stiffened while his gaze was filled with sadness. Yingying, it's only been 3 years. Why have you changed? Huang Yingying sneered and looked at the man's handsome face. 3 years ago, your father personally came, warning me not to get close to you. Right now, I'm the one who despises you. Young Luo Feng narrowed her eyes. It seems like after Huang Yingying left the witchcraft tribe 3 years ago, she had not followed Hongluan and instead had something to do with the North Province young master. If her guess was right, this man named Ling Shuang should be the younger brother of Hongluan's ex-fiance. Ling Shuang tightly clenched his fist, with a look of suffering on his face. He couldn't understand, why did that dainty young lady become so cold? Miss Yun. Huang Yingying ignored Ling Shuang, turned towards young Luo Feng and smiled. Young Luo Feng slightly nodded. Ignore him, let's go. Later on, tell me what happened between you and the North Province Governor estate. Huang Yingying stiffened, seemingly recalling some memories that she was reluctant to recall, and she looked like she was suffering. All right. Chapter 1572. Meeting Huang Yingying again too. In an unadorned and compact inn, Huang Yingying poured a cup of tea for young Luo Feng before sitting down. 3 years ago, the leader of witchcraft tribe tasked me to deliver the witchcraft flower to save Miss Hongluan, and so I left the tribe. Furthermore, after Miss Hongluan had regained consciousness, I left and traveled alone. While traveling, I encountered Ling Shuang. Huang Yingying's smile contained bitterness. Ling Shuang didn't have a haughty attitude like other young masters, and his personality was very gentle, taking care of me in all aspects. Furthermore, I wasn't experienced in matters of love, so I fell in love. However, after the governor found out about our relationship, he came looking for me and forced me to leave Ling Shuang. Young Luo Feng sipped her tea and quirked her brow. He was unaware you're the witchcraft tribe's lady saintess. Huang Yingying shook her head. I did not reveal my identity to Ling Shuang, and when the governor came looking, I stopped the guards the tribe leader dispatched to protect me, who wanted to stick up for me. With the North Governor's influence as such, why should I cling to them? Since he intends to find a woman with a well-matched background, he should do as he pleases. I do not value the position of Lady of the Governor Estate. Even though the North Governor Estate of North Province was the faction that dominated the North Province, the Witchcraft Tribe was one of the top-ranked factions of the Central Province. Their faction would be on par with the Central Province's Governor Estate. If a traitor hadn't appeared in the Witchcraft Tribe, they would be able to exterminate the Poison Valley without an effort with the tribe leader's strength even if all their experts had attacked. One could imagine how powerful the witchcraft tribe was in the central province. Existing in the central province for so long, the witchcraft tribe had also inherited many things. If it weren't for the unforeseen event within the tribe several years ago, perhaps the tribe would be a faction that was above various provinces. What about Ling Shuang's attitude towards you? Young Luo Feng pondered for a moment and asked. Huang Yingying trembled and she lowered her eyes. Ling Shuang treats me well, but he's not firm and steady enough. He did not accept or reject the fiancé his father selected, and only advised me to wait. Huang Yingying bitterly laughed. He said there would come a day when his father would accept us. Alas, what awaited me was his father's warning. After she spoke, Huang Yingying looked at Yun Luofeng, while tightly biting her lips. At that time, I cried and returned to the witchcraft tribe where I found out about your death. The tribe leader deceived me and claimed that if I were to complete the inheritance, you would return. 3 years ago, after obtaining news of Yun Luofeng's death, she nearly crumbled, and coupled with losing her love, there was a time where she wanted to abandon herself to despair. However, the tribe leader's words gave her hope and confidence. Huang Yingying was filled with guilt. The tribe leader had done this in her best interests and she shouldn't have been so cruel to him. Yun Luofeng stroked her chin. She had nearly forgotten about the North Governor estate. Oh right, Miss Yun. I heard that you went looking for the Ghost Emperor at God Burial Mountain. Did you find him? Yun Luofeng lifted her sight and said while gently smiling. Since I have been low on medicinal herbs recently, he went to the medical stores to purchase some. Initially, I was waiting for him at the market, but unexpectedly I bumped into you. Regardless of whether it was Little Tree or the gold-seeking hamsters, they required medicinal herbs as nutrients. Right now, there was another pet that consumed medicinal herbs as food, Little Bug. Chapter 1573, Clinging Obstinately 1. Miss Yun, Huang Yingying shallowly smiled and her appearance was sharp, looking extremely beautiful. What are your plans from now on? Plans. Yun Luofeng was silent for a moment, while a cold glint streaked across her eyes. The top priority job now is to increase my strength. What she was about to face was not only the saintly virgin tribe but also Mo Qiancheng, who was glaring like a tiger while watching their prey. Furthermore, her lies could only deceive Mo Qiancheng temporarily and not forever. In the end, they would be seen through by him. Oh right, Huang Yingying suddenly recalled something. I remember that Hong Luan went to the Beast Province and after that, I lost all contact with her. After news of you being alive was passed on, the East Province went looking for Hong Luan, but even after searching the whole province, they couldn't locate her whereabouts. Just then, the door was pushed open and as she turned over, she saw the black-robed man walking in and a bewitching smile surfaced. Yun Xiao, you're done. Yun Xiao paused for a moment and asked, you're heading to the Beast Province? Hong Luan was missing in the Beast Province and according to Yun Luofeng's personality, she would definitely head there. Yes, Yun Luofeng's eyes were pitch black. I want to search for Hong Luan. Okay, I'll accompany you, Yun Xiao faintly smiled. Furthermore, I have some power in the Beast Province and I'll take the opportunity to hand them to you. Ever since Yun Luofeng arrived in the Seven Province continent, she had never seen the faction Yun Xiao had established. Since he decided to pave the road for Yun Luofeng, he would definitely have achieved something. Right now, Yun Luofeng finally knew that Yun Xiao's faction was in the Beast Province. Yun Xiao, when you were being chased at that time, why didn't you utilize your faction? Hearing her words, he turned silent. After a long time, he honestly replied. Those people were prepared for you, so I didn't want any members to get injured. Furthermore, I don't believe that they could injure me. When speaking, his tone was domineering, having an awe-inspiring momentum. The man's expressionless face was cold and callous, while his black eyes faintly contained a violent storm. I know the road that goes to the Beast Province. Huang Yingying bit her lips. We need to pass through the North Province and after that, we will have to travel past a desert. Following that, we will arrive at the Beast Province. North Province. When mentioning these two words, Huang Yingying's heart shuddered. You should return to the witchcraft tribe. Yun Luofeng turned towards Huang Yingying and said with indifference. The tribe leader should be searching for you. In addition, Yun Xiao's faction was in the Beast Province, so he would certainly be familiar with the road there. No, Huang Yingying shook her head. I intended to accept the witchcraft tribe so I could assist you. Before locating Miss Hong Luan, I will never return. When she spoke, Huang Yingying lifted her skirt and walked to stand before Yun Luo Feng. Half kneeling on the ground, her expression was of respect and determination. Miss Yun, please allow me to follow beside you. In my life, I will never turn my back on you. Yun Luo Feng lowered her sight and looked straight at her determined countenance, and suddenly, she chuckled. Following me, you'll definitely encounter many dangers, trials, and might even lose your life the very next moment. Do you still intend to follow me even so? Huang Yingying spoke with bitterness. My family was killed by others, and if it weren't for revenge, I'm afraid I would have followed them. Now that I've avenged my parents, I have no regrets even if I lose my life. Chapter 1574. Clinging obstinately to. I understand, this is your choice and I'll take you with me from now on. Yun Luo Feng lifted Huang Yingying up, as her wicked voice contained indifference. Huang Yingying was delighted. Frankly speaking, she had steeled her heart to be rejected, but unexpectedly, Yun Luo Feng agreed to it. Miss, to head to the Beast Province, we must pass through the North Province, but I'm worried. They might not let us through. There were guards at the gates of every city in the North Province, and they had to go through the gates in order to pass by the North Province. If they were unwilling to let them pass, they would be unable to successfully proceed towards the Beast Province unless they used force. So what if the North Province is unwilling to let us pass? Even though Ling Chen of the North Province had a grudge against her, he wouldn't paste her portrait on the city gates to prevent them from passing through, would he? The Ghost Emperor should be well aware of this. The Beast Province is different from various large provinces, with the majority of residents being spirit beasts with comparatively few humans. In addition, the beast race is fond of attacking humans, and so, their relationship with various provinces isn't good. However, the Beast Province is the most powerful among the various large provinces. The strength of the spirit beast could be seen from the territory they established that could stand tall without falling among numerous humans. As such, the city gates separating the Beast Province and the other various provinces is heavily guarded. Humans from the Beast Province can leave, but they'll never allow any humans to enter. I doubt the North Province would be so kind-hearted as to dispatch guards and heavily guard the gates to prevent humans from throwing away their lives, Yun Luo Feng slowly said. Huang Yingying helplessly shook her head. Miss, it's human nature to be greedy. Each and every spirit beast in the Beast Province is powerful, and the majority of them have swallowed the anthropomorphism fruit and morphed into a human appearance. For humans, such a spirit beast is a treasure they yearn for even in their dreams. Over the many years, there would often be humans delusionally wanting to enter the Beast Province and have those spirit beasts be contracted to them, so they could use them to fight. At this point, Huang Yingying's words became somewhat cautious. However, later on, those humans had instead surrendered to those spirit beasts, increasing the Beast Province's influence. Yun Luo Feng quirked her brow. Why is that so? Huang Yingying pursed her lips. It's rumored that those spirit beasts who morphed into human appearance are all extremely gorgeous, even more beautiful than humans. There's even a fox clan that specializes in the art of seduction, charming others and have them willingly abandon their human nature, becoming a slave for the spirit beasts. To prevent the number of experts on the continent from decreasing, the various provinces unanimously decided to turn back all experts who wanted to enter the Beast Province. As a result, the Beast Province only allowed exits and prevented entrances. However, any experts who left the Beast Province would be supervised by various large factions, guaranteeing they would not be brainwashed by the beast race. As for those weaker humans wanting to leave the Beast Province, the moment they took a single step out, they would be secretly disposed of by the North Province's experts. Yun Luo Feng lifted her brow, looking towards Yun Xiao, and asked with a smile, how did you previously enter the Beast Province? The arrival location of the spatial wormhole is the Beast Province. What about those who were supervising you when you left? Dead. Yun Xiao's answer was simple and straightforward. Yun Luo Feng gently stroked her chin. I'm not sure how Hong Luan entered the Beast Province, but I understand that I must head there. Yun Xiao, Huang Yingying, we shall leave today. The faster we find her, the sooner any danger she encountered will decrease. Chapter 1575. Clinging obstinately 3. On the streets that were as noisy as always, just as Yun Luofeng and company stepped out of the inn, they bumped into Ling Shuang, who seemed to appear everywhere. He stared at Huang Yingying with fixed eyes, with unconcealed adoration. "Yingying, stop being angry and return with me. My father has agreed that he will no longer stand between us." Huang Yingying sneered, "Do you think you'll believe that someone so snobbish would accept me?" "Yingying, regardless of whether my father accepts you or not, as long as you return with me, I will marry you." Ling Shuang's had an anxious look on his face, wanting to pull Huang Yingying to him. She twisted to the side, evading his hands while a cold smile quirked on her lips. "Why should I believe in a man like you who has no courage?" After speaking, Huang Yingying no longer spared Ling Shuang a glance and respectfully stood behind Yun Luofeng. "Miss, you can ignore him and let's continue to set off." "Miss." Ling Shuang's eyes revealed surprise as he looked at Yun Luofeng with astonishment, and his complexion was unsightly. "Yingying, you're a maid." Huang Yingying was only a maid. Impossible. With her mannerism, how could she be someone else's maid? Even if she was only an aristocratic family's young miss, perhaps his father wouldn't oppose them. Why was she only a maid? HMPH. Huang Yingying's gaze changed to revulsion from its initial disappointment. As expected, everyone in the North Governor estate was snobbish, so why should she constantly think of him? "Miss," Ling Shuang's eyes flickered, then slowly walked to Yun Luofeng and cupped his hands, and said, "I know you're Yingying's lord, but could you help me with a favor? I hope you'll take in Yingying as your foster sister, and this way, I can persuade my father." He was unaware of Yun Luofeng's identity, but looking at her mannerism, she would at least be a second-rate family even if she wasn't a first-rate one. Although such an identity couldn't be well matched with the North Governor estate, at least there was still a trace of hope. Yun Xiao's callous eyes gradually landed on Ling Shuang, with a dense killing aura contained in his eyes. This aura caused Ling Shuang's body to shudder. However, in order to marry Huang Yingying, he looked at Yun Luofeng with resolution. Yun Luofeng chucked, "Why should I help you?" "Miss, you aren't helping me but instead, helping yourself." Ling Shuang's expression was somewhat unhappy. "If I marry Yingying, she'll be the lady of the North Governor estate and your status would also develop accordingly to the situation. This is an advantageous business transaction for you." If it weren't for Yingying, he would never speak rubbish with this woman without the ability to make discerning judgments. North Governor estate. Yun Luofeng slanted her head, with a smile surfacing her wicked eyes. "That's right." Ling Shuang held his head high and chest out. "I'm the young master of the North Governor estate." At this moment, Ling Shuang was currently waiting for Yun Luofeng's shock and fawning. If it was others who had the opportunity to meet with him, they would immediately kneel and hug his thigh, without an exception. However, facing the conceited Ling Shuang, Yun Luofeng's smile deepened. "I only know that there is someone called Ling Chen in the North Governor estate. He betrayed Hong Luan first, yet was pestering her incessantly. Alas, he suffered retribution." Ling Shuang stiffened, looking up with shock as his startled gaze fell on Yun Luofeng. This woman knew Hong Luan. Even Huang Yingying standing beside her was startled.